Hey guys, today I'm going to talk to you about what I call the International Coffee Can Stove. It's a stove that I came up with a few years back. Never uh, really engineered this, but today that's what we're going to do. We're going to make another one, and I'm going to fix all the little bugs that I have with this one, and I'll show you how it's done. So follow along. It's a simple little stove. It's made out of a square can. The door is made out of just a regular soup can. I'll show you how that's done. But I wanted a hinge door that I could feed wood into and then close so I could focus my heat up to whatever I was cooking, either a pot or a cup. It has a pot stand that's collapsible. Well, it's a little bit stuck there. And the pieces go inside the can, and then it has a stand for itself so that it can breathe air up and also keep my surface from getting burnt. Normally I'd put this on a rock, but if I can't find a rock, this will keep me from burning down the forest floor. This also fits inside. I can put a lighter, I can put dry wood in here, I can put whatever I want in here. Take the lid, close it up, and throw this in my pack, and it's ready to go. I would probably put this in a container because right after you're done using it, you're gonna get soot all over yourself and all over your gear. So throw it in a bag or something, and then put it in your backpack if you're going on a hike. But it works really good. It's nice and compact. It acts as a container so I can carry all the essentials. But I'm going to take this in the house, get my hands washed up a little bit. We'll get another can and we'll start cutting into it and make that stove. It's getting a little stormy out here. The wind's blowing kind of hard and I'm under a whole lot of widow makers. So we'll move inside and keep going. Well, we're back in the house. It was getting a little rough outside. And like I said, I call this my International Coffee Can Stove. It's made out of an international coffee can. I don't even know if they make these anymore, and if they do, they're probably in a plastic container. But this just goes to show I wanted to think outside of the box when it came to making a can stove. You don't have to use a round can. You can use a square can. And I had a bunch of these, probably from either the 70s or 80s. My mom used to drink this stuff. It was coffee that was more like hot chocolate. You just scooped a couple scoops into your mug, added some hot water, and this one was French vanilla, and they came in all these different flavors. And I remember I always saved the cans because I could keep my miscellaneous nuts and bolts and screws in my workshop. I keep in cans like this. Not super organized, but I guess better than throwing everything into one bucket. I figured, I've got a few of these cans. With my luck, there are collector items that are worth over $100 each. I don't care. I'm going to be cutting up another one of these and show you how I made this stove. But just to go over it again real quick, all I'm going to do is cut a hole in the front of the can. I'm going to use another can to cut out the door. And the door, believe it or not, is hinged with a paper clip. And a couple of folds on the metal. I'll show you how I do that. The base on this one, I made out of rat wire, or some people call it rabbit wire, or I don't know, maybe 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch wire. This stuff here, whoops. I'm just gonna cut a piece of this and use this as the base. I have another base that I tried making here out of like wire hanger. The whole thing folded up nice and neat, and so I could tuck it away in my can, and when I needed to use it, I could unfold it and then sit my can right on top, and it gave me a really solid pot stand. And it didn't really get hot because there's not a whole lot of mass to this, which was nice. But it's not as stable and it's not as simple. This right here fits inside the can. It doesn't take up any space at all because it sits around the outside of the can. It's super lightweight. It's galvanized, but it doesn't get hot. It's just holding my can above the ground, and I can make it as high or as low as I want. 2 of these little blocks, maybe a little under 1 inch, was high enough for me, but you could go even higher if you want. It's just going to reduce the stability of the can. And then for my pot stand is made out of this galvanized strapping. I just cut a few pieces. I notched them so that they fit together like puzzle pieces. That way I can just take them apart and store them in the can. They're kind of heavy. They weigh a little bit, but they really work well. I haven't come up with anything that works better for this situation. But I think with the newer ones, because I have so much room in this can, I think I'm going to make these a little bit longer. And that'll just give me a bigger base in case I'm using a larger pan rather than just a cup like I was just using. So those are a few things that I'm going to do for modifications. The pot stand is going to be a little bigger. The base, I'm kind of happy with this base. The door, I'm going to make the door just a little bit taller this time so that the top closes better and holds everything together. This works. But I think if I made it a little bit taller, that would be good. Now the bottom of the can is riddled with holes. And that way I have airflow coming up from the bottom to keep my fire going. One other thing I think I'm going to do on the new one is put some holes along the outside edge. Because what I find is even on a windy day like today, the wind isn't getting in here to keep the fire going. I am constantly getting down and blowing into my fire to keep it ignited. And, you know, that's kind of frustrating. And just adding a few holes, I think, is going to take care of that problem. If not, it's not going to hurt. So we're going to give that a shot. So let's remake the International Coffee Can Stove and see if we can make it better than the first one. The first thing we're going to do is cut out for our door here on the front. I'm not going to be super accurate with measurements. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I don't want to cut on this bend. I want to cut on the flat part of the side. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball where I'm going to make that cut. To make the cut straight, though, one thing that I can do is I'm going to take some masking tape. And I'm just going to put tape right along the edge where I want to cut. And it gives me a straight line to follow with my tin snips. That way I kind of have an idea where I'm going to be cutting. Just a simple guide. I'm going to do that on both sides. I'll do one at a time. The hard part's going to be cutting through this lip here in the front because it's a little bit thicker. But once I'm through that, I can just follow that line straight down and make that cut. Now I'm going to start the other side as well. Again, I'm just going to take a piece of masking tape. I'm going to kind of put it in the same place as the first one, just so I have that straight line to follow. I'll get that one cut out and then I'll bring you back. All right, I finished my first 2 cuts. I'm going to take the tape off so we can get a better look at what's going on here. And I'm not going to just cut this piece off quite yet because we need to leave a piece so that we can make that hinge. I'm going to save this piece of tape. But you can see I cut all the way to the bottom on this one. And all the way to the bottom on this side so that I can kind of bend this back and out of the way. This will be our opening. I suppose I could just keep this as a door, but eventually from opening and closing it, it's just going to break it right off. So we're going to put a hinged door on here. Unfortunately, cutting this off doesn't allow me enough metal on it where I can use this piece as the door. So we're going to have to make a totally separate door altogether, but we'll get to that. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to take that piece of tape and I'm going to put it right in the center of that door, or try to put it in the center. I'm not going to measure again. Not super critical that I get this exact. I just want to get it close and try to make it straight. I should have had a little more coffee this morning, I think. There we go. So I'm just putting that piece of tape here because what we're going to do, I'm going to cut right across the top. I don't know if that height really matters too much yet, but now I'm going to cut on either side of that tape. Let me get this lined up and try to show you as I'm doing it. Inside, and then the other side. Let me do that one again. And I'm going to take those two side pieces and just bend those out of the way for right now, just so I can show you what's going on here. We left this little tab. What this is going to be is the center barrel in our hinge. I'm going to cut it a lot shorter, but ultimately that's going to curl backwards and it's going to have our pin going through it. And that's what our door is going to hinge on. That's why we left this little tab here. So these two little pieces here, there's really no way to get in there and cut unless I use a sharp knife and just keep scoring it and scoring it and scoring it. I'm going to just bend these back and forth a few times. And this is also a good demonstration of why I didn't want to make the door this way. Eventually, after bending this a few times, it's just going to break right off. And if I had kept that piece that I cut as the door, this is exactly what would happen. The door would just stop working. So that's why we're making a separate door, and putting it on a hinge is going to allow it to open and close without creating any kind of a stress or a weakness. So let me get this other piece busted off. I'm going to get this center piece a little bit cleaned up and I'll show you what it looks like. And then we'll move on to making the door portion of it. Well, I finished cleaning up my cut here in the front. And I left that little tab. I cut it a little bit shorter, so it's only maybe 1/4 of an inch. Not sure if you can see that. That's going to be, like I said, the center barrel on our hinge. So the next thing we need to do is cut out for the door. And I went out into the recycling, got a piece of cardboard. I'm going to quickly just cut out a little piece. I like to make cardboard or paper templates of anything before I commit. I don't trust myself to get things right. So what I'm going to do is just fit this piece inside. I'm going to take a pen and kind of template out my door. Okay, and then the other thing I'm going to do is take that little tab. I'll bend it back just so I can mark where that is as well. That's going to let me know on my template where I need my hinge pieces, how wide the door has to be. I'm going to make it a little wider than the opening so that way it closes against the side of the can. And then here at the very top, I want to be able to cut it small enough that it fits inside the cut. If that doesn't make any sense, you'll see when I do it. So that when I close the door sits against the can, but the very top lip sits flush with the rest of the can. Otherwise, the lid won't be able to sit on it correctly. So once we get there, I'll be able to show you and explain that a little bit better. But the first thing we need to do is figure out the hinge and the top. Now, one mistake that I've made in the past that I don't want anybody else to make is don't think that this template is the exact shape and size that I need to cut out. Because once I cut this out and I roll these little legs here so they can become part of that hinge, it just reduced the overall height by 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. So now my door isn't going to come all the way up to the top. That was why the original door was, you know how I said it was a little bit short and I wanted to make it taller? That's why that happened. So knowing that now, I want to cut the door a little bit taller than I need. for the hinge. So we've got our template. I can move on to a large can. I'm going to cut down from the top, and I want to save this top edge because this lip here is going to match this lip here. That way when I snap the lid on, it actually has a little lip that it can snap onto. So we're going to use the top portion of the can as the top portion of our door, if that makes any sense. So let me get this marked off. Again, I'm going to use masking tape so I have a cutting guide to use. And once I get that marked and cut out, I'll show you what we have, and then we'll start rolling up these pieces for the hinge. Had to put my glasses on for this next part. Cut out the piece. It's a lot bigger than it needs to be. You can see that it's maybe 1/4 of an inch higher than it needs to be. And here's that little tab that we left on the door. So if I put the door on, and I show you where that tab is, we're gonna cut out for that tab. We're gonna cut this piece out, and we're gonna leave these 2 legs. Those will get rolled. The center tab is gonna get rolled, and then we'll just slide a pin through it, and that'll be our hinge to open and close this door. Now, by doing that and using about 1/4 of an inch from those legs, with any luck, this is where my math skills have to come into play, it will reduce the height enough that this is now flush with the top. So let's get our masking tape on here. Because I used a piece of masking tape when I left this tab, I know that tab is exactly the width of a piece of masking tape. So I can just put a piece of masking tape here right across the middle. And I know it's the right size to cut out. So now what I want to do is just make sure that if I center the door, that tape is actually in the right spot. And it is. You can see how the tape lines up with the little tab. So then the other thing I need to do now is figure how high up do I want to cut. And for that, I want to make the top flush and mark right at the very bottom, not the bottom of the can, but the bottom of that hinge that we created. And that's going to be my cut height. And I'm going to cut up to that line, cut up to that line, cut the center piece out, and it'll leave us kind of with the lower half part of an H. Once I get that cut out, I'll bring you back and show you. Okay, and I'll use this just to give you a better look at what we've done here. Okay, I cut out that center piece. I left these 2 legs that are going to get rolled as our hinge barrels. I cut in on the sides a little bit because we don't want the hinge to overlap the can. We only want the door part to overlap the can. So this width here is the same as the opening on the can. Okay, and then the other thing I did is the same thing at the very top. I cut in so that the very top lip is the same width as the opening on the can. And I just kind of just cut out to the side. So ultimately what we've got is the door is going to fit like this with a lip. Can get bent in just a little bit. That will complete this top brim so that the lid can fit on. The door is a little oversized, so it's going to clap against the can and not fall into the can. And then we left 1/4 of an inch at the bottom here so that I can roll these up into the barrels for the hinge. But if you look, they fit into the opening. I guess this is a better way to show it, maybe like this. They fit into the opening, and they fit into the opening, and they straddle this little tab here. So the next thing we need to do is roll these up and get a paper clip through there. I know I brought out a paper clip, but we'll get a paper clip. I'll put it here and we're gonna roll these legs around that paper clip. So that'll be the next thing we do. Let's move on to that. Oh, one more thing, a quick tip that Marilyn had brought up. Keep those extra pieces of tape that you were using around. And you can see they're great for picking up all those little metal clippings that you have from cutting the metal. That way I have a clean work surface and I don't end up with little metal fragments all over my arms. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna take this paper clip, and you don't have to use a paper clip. You can use a piece of wire, you can use a finishing nail, you can use whatever you want. I just happen to have this, and it doesn't have to be heavy duty. It's, you know, just gonna hold this little tin door on. But I'm gonna straighten it. Okay, and then I'm gonna try, to the best of my ability, to roll these little legs here around the wire. Now I only have to do one at a time. I'll just start by curling one of these up. Then I'm gonna slip the wire into it. And I'll hold it in place and just kind of keep winding until I get that in there. And the wire slides in and out of it. So I'll get that a little bit neater. I'll do the other side, and then I'll bring you back and we'll clip this to length, this paper clip, and we'll attach the door. Well, I got those pieces rolled around my paper clip, and I left the paper clip just a little longer than it needs to be, but it still slides in and out. Once I get that paper clip through there, the next step is going to be to just bend that tab on the can outward just a little bit and slip that between the paper clip and the door you just made. And we don't need to roll this one so much as just fold it backwards. Okay. And that's our door. So now our door closes. The lid looks like it's at the right height. We may have to kind of bend things just a little bit to make them fit right. Let me grab a top and make sure my top goes on still. And I didn't prevent that from working. Yeah, just need a little tweak at this end here. Okay, so my top goes on. It holds the door in place. Can't pull it open. So the door is pretty much done. Get that out of the way. And it opens. Like I said, it may have to get worked in a little bit, bent, until everything kind of plays nice. And it closes. So now this paper clip really doesn't have to be this long. A couple things you can do. You can either bend them over so that it doesn't slide in and out, or if yours turned out anything like mine, it's really, really tight in there. So I can just not really worry about it. I'm just going to cut that extra off, slide it back in, and I'm really not worried about the paper clip falling out on mine. If yours, it's a little bit loose, maybe you used a finishing nail instead of a paper clip, or you didn't roll it as tight, so that barrel in there is a little bit loose, just bend it over so that it doesn't slide out while you're using it or carrying it around. So now that the door is done, the next thing to move on to is to create our pot stand for the top. That I'm going to have to do out in the workshop because I'm not going to be able to cut these with tin snips. Unfortunately, they're a little heavy, so I'm going to use a cutoff wheel. You can use a hacksaw, whatever you're comfortable with as a tool. I'm lucky enough that I already have a template because If it fit one can, it's going to fit this one. And as you can see, yeah, everything lines up nicely. But like I said, I want to make it different. I want these to be a little bit longer so they really just fill the whole can space. And I have a little bit more surface to rest my pots and pans on. So before I start cutting, like I said, I don't commit to anything until I have a template. I'm going to take some cardboard and I'm going to take the strapping that I'm going to use. And I only have so much of this to work with, so I don't want a bad cut. I want to use every inch of it as efficiently as possible. So here's my template. I can grab a pair of scissors and just quickly cut this out. I do this with anything that I'm building, pretty much. We always have cardboard from boxes or whatnot in our recycling, or even if you just use printer paper. But here I can experiment without actually cutting my metal. So what I can do is say, okay, well, I want this to be about that long. I can take my template piece, cut it, and say, okay, well, now I need a slot here and a slot here that I want to come about halfway. And on my template, I don't have to be super accurate. And the other beauty is I can quickly just cut this out with a pair of scissors. I don't need to use a cutoff wheel or a hacksaw and burn too many calories trying this out. So I'll just get these cut. And then I can fit it, and it fits perfect. Now that I know this fits perfect, I can take this piece, tape it onto my piece of metal here, or I can use a Sharpie and just trace out where all of my cuts are going to be. So what I'm going to do is cut all 4 pieces out of cardboard, and I'll put all of them together, make sure they fit right, and once I know that they're fitting perfectly, I can then go out into the workshop and buzz up my metal here and know I'm not wasting any of it. I'm not going to cut it and it doesn't fit right and I have to throw it away and make another one. So let's get the templates created and then we'll move on from that point. Well, I got all my template pieces cut out and I can dry fit all of those to make sure that everything is going to fit exactly the way I want it. Like I said, I don't want to take chances and cut the metal prematurely. I want to make sure all the slots are where they need to be. And if anything's a little snug or doesn't fit right, I could waste cardboard. But I can see everything fits just the way I want it to. Nice and tight. I may make the cuts on the metal a little bit looser. That way they're not as sticky. I don't know if you remember earlier, I was trying to take it apart, and because I had just used it, the heat expanded the metal, made it a little tough to take apart. It doesn't have to be super tight. So maybe I'll make the slots a little bit bigger this time. That way everything easily fits together. But anyway, I've got my templates now, so I can take this off. I see everything fits good and works well. And the way I did it is all of my cuts go halfway up. And the cut in here goes halfway. So that when I put these together, they go together and they're at the same height. And that's going to be really important because to keep the pan balanced on my stove, I need to make sure that all of this stuff is flush. So when I take these templates and mark them off, I'm also going to recheck my measurements on the metal before I actually cut, just to make sure everything comes out perfect. But anyway, I'm going to take my templates. I've got one more piece of strapping. It's going to take about 2 of these. I'm going to go out into the workshop. We'll get these buzzed. Once I get these buzzed out and cut out and make sure everything fits good, I'm going to take these pieces here and I'm going to put them in an outdoor fire. You can do this in an outdoor barbecue, or you can do it in a fire pit, or Because the metal I'm using is galvanized, just to get rid of the galvanization that's on here, I'm gonna, once these are cut out and sanded and everything works right, I test everything that works right, I'll throw them into a fire and really burn them in good. We'll also be burning in the stove once it's finished. If you want to use sandpaper to take the paint off, that's great. I'm lazier than that. I'm just gonna do an initial burn in and let the fire take care of all the paint for me. Once it's burnt, it'll wash right off. This can is not lined, but the can that you choose might have a lining on the inside. And if that's the case, like a Teflon or some kind of a plastic lining, you're gonna wanna burn that out as well before you cook food on here. I got the new pieces cut out. I just took them out of the fire. Well, I let them cool down first, then I took them out of the fire. But this is the new one. This is the old one. And you can see there's quite a difference in length. So that should make a difference on our pot. And they still fit inside. So I can still pack all this away and it lays flat in here. So that was my big concern. I wanted to be able to increase my pot stand and still be able to fit everything in the can. And it looks like that worked out really well. Also, I made those slots a little bit bigger so that it goes together easier and it comes apart easier. So the next thing we need to do is drill out our holes on the bottom, add the additional holes around the sides, and then make a new stand for it to sit on. Well, I finished drilling. I used a 1/4-inch drill bit, and I did the same drill pattern I did on the bottom. The difference is I don't think I used a 1/4-inch drill bit on the original one. It was a little bit smaller. So I opened it up a little bit, but I didn't want to go any bigger than 1/4 of an inch. Otherwise, my fire would just be falling out of the bottom of the stove. But I did the same pattern. So I've got, let's see, 18 holes on the bottom here. And I did 4 on both sides. And I did 2 in the back here. So hopefully that makes a big difference as far as allowing my fire to breathe. So the next thing we need to do is make a stove base. Like I said, I kind of like this design. Maybe what I'll do for this one, because I can always make something smaller, but I can't make it bigger. I'll take this base that's 2 blocks high, and I'll cut one that's 3 blocks high. So let me get that cut out, and I'll show you how I connect the ends here to make it like one solid piece. Well, I measured all the way around here so that I knew what length to cut my piece to. And I also left the tabs on one end. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just start bending this thing to kind of have this shape. And then once I get that all bent up, I'll show you how I connect the ends. Okay, it's rough at this point, and I may have to kind of make some adjustments. But I'm going to take these wire tabs that I left and just feed those through the squares here, and then I'll just wrap them around and just use those to tie the 2 ends together. That way I don't have to use a separate piece of wire to kind of twist tie things together. I can just do it this way. And if your fingers aren't as calloused and tough as mine, you can use a pair of pliers to bend these wires around. There we go. So now my end is connected nice and tight. So now I just need to kind of straighten this thing up and make sure that it fits the bottom of the can good so that I sit nice and level when I put down when I put the stove on top of it. I don't want it teetering and rocking because my base is unstable. That's what I meant by, if I don't want to make it too tall, I make it too tall, and then things are gonna be rocking and tippy, and nothing's worse than cooking your water and finally getting it to a boil and then having the whole thing fall over on you because it's not steady. So I'll just straighten this thing out and make sure everything fits good. And then the other thing I want to make sure also, not only does my can fit stably on that base, I want to make sure the base also fits inside here. That way I can carry it. So I want to make sure it's small enough to fit in here, but as big as possible to fit under the can. And the bottom of the can has this lip. So I'm trying to get it to sit inside that lip. That way it's a nice solid base. But once I get all that twisted and nice and neat, we'll be ready to build a fire in this. So here's our finished assembly. I'm going to put all the pieces together. Put my pot stand together. And then put the pot stand on my stove. And there you have it. And we can feed wood in here, get the fire going, focus the fire in an upward direction by closing the door. And let's get this burnt in. I'm not going to cook anything on it until all this paint is burnt off. That should happen with the first burn-in we do. So I'll bring this outside. We'll build a small fire and see how it worked. Okay, I just got this thing lit up over here in our grill. It's a really windy day, and there's also a high fire risk, so I don't want to do this outside. I really want a crazy fire. Of course, I wouldn't be cooking on a fire like this, but I want this to really burn this in good and make sure that it's not going to be putting out any weird kind of fumes while I'm trying to purify water or cook food. So we'll get this thing going really well. Whoops. Just a few little twigs in there. I'll let this burn for a little while. And can't get the door shut yet. Once this burns down a little bit more, I'll close the door and really focus the heat on the inside. But we'll get this all burnt up, and then I'll wash it because it's going to be filthy. And then I'll bring you back and let you know what I think. So far, it looks like it's getting plenty of oxygen. So I'll give you final thoughts when this is all finished. Well, we finished that burn in, and I got everything washed up without getting too dirty. It worked out great. I don't know about the height. It's a little bit wobbly. I'm sure it'll be stable enough to cook on. Because I tested this on our wood stove, on our grill outside, I don't know if the height made a difference over the original one. The holes that we put on the outside definitely made a difference. I could tell right away. Just the way it was shooting the flames straight up showed me there was a lot more air coming in the bottom. It could be because it was a windy day, but like I had said, even when we were in the middle of a windstorm, this one here was just having a hard time getting enough oxygen to keep going. Whereas this one, it just lit right up, stayed lit the entire time, and burnt everything down to a nice powder. So worked out really well. I'm glad we made the changes that we made. And those are all changes that I can easily adapt for the original stove. I'll just put the holes here, make the holes in the bottom a little bit bigger. And if I need to, I can make a taller stand, but I'm not sure if that's even a benefit at this point. But everything fits nice and neat together. Even with the taller stand, it fits fine. and put the top on it, and it's ready to pack and go. Plenty of room in here to put sisal, fat wood, a ferrocerium striker, a Bic lighter, cotton with Vaseline, or just collect dry wood as you're going through the woods. Drop it in here. You'll have a kit that's completely self-contained with everything that you need. And like I said, I'll give this one to Marilyn to put in one of her kits, and I'll modify my original one with the same modifications we made here, and we'll both have another stove for another one of our packs. We've got plenty of stoves. We have lots of different cook options. We're the type of people who like to create different cook kits. Making it, I think, is half the fun. Making it as small as you can without being so small that it's useless. Making it from things that would normally get thrown away. And trying to make it in a way that everything kind of nests together. Your cook pots and your stove and your fire kit, and get all that nested together into one piece. So when you put it in your bag, I know if I'm going to be starting a fire so that I can boil some water, so that I can make some food, all of that is in one kit. Where my first aid, obviously you put all your first aid in one kit. So we do the same thing with our fire kits. But anyway, I hope you like this video. If you like the stove videos, I'm constantly making new ones. I've got a collection of old stoves that we've made. You may have seen an IKEA stove that was used when I was burning the pot stand. So we've got lots of different stoves. I can show you how we make those things, or we can just go out for a foraging trip, maybe do some cooking in the woods, and you get to see some of these in action. Let us know what you like to watch down in the comments below. Make sure to share it with your friends, like and subscribe if this is your type of video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.